Here's an interesting story that Mark Cuban will not even talk about anymore. You can't find it online and it's been completely scrubbed off the internet. When he first got rich and bought a private jet, he went to a gentleman's club with some of his friends and ended the night by taking a few strippers with him on his private jet to Vegas for the night. He used to talk about these crazy stories when he first came into the public eye, but as he's gotten older and more mainstream, he doesn't talk about these stories anymore. And the people who interview him don't ask him about them, and probably they're not allowed to ask him about them. And they're probably not allowed to bring these stories up. Before we get into it, please subscribe to my channel because it helps me bring you more and more cool content. What I think makes Mark Cuban so interesting is that he's made his money, and he kind of, at least before, he didn't really have a filter. He does now because he's, like I said, he's more mainstream. It seems like he's more conscious of his persona or his reputation now. He's married, he's got kids. His kids are probably teenagers now, so he's in a different point of his life. But I think what's always made Mark Cuban so interesting is that he has seemed to live the life that we all dream about. We dream about making $1 billion and buying a jet. But let's get into the story. He told this story a long time ago when he was fresh on the scene, when he was just freshly minted as a billionaire. He's 65 years old now. And at the time he joined the billionaire ranks, he was 40. So this story goes back 25 years, and it's been scrubbed clean from the internet. You can't find anything, because even when before I made this video, I went back to just, because this is all by memory. I remember the story, and I always thought it was funny, so I went back. I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna, kind of research it, just see if there's any details I missed out or didn't remember, and I couldn't find anything about it. There's another story that he talked about. But it was he went to a club with like the team, his basketball team or something. So that was already when he was, well known, and that's not the story. So he told this story how he went with some friends to a local club when he first made $1 billion. Now keep in mind too that no one knew who Mark Cuban was. Even in the business world, he was still relatively unknown. So they're at this club just spending money like crazy, and it's a normal place, and none of these real high-end places that you see all the high rollers coming in and dropping all this cash. This is just a regular place. So him and his friends are having a good time, and he said that as he spent more and more money and had more and more drinks, he started telling the girls that he had a private jet. And of course, none of them believed them, because you got to imagine that there's guys that come through all these gentlemen clubs talking about how rich they are and how they've got these fancy things and they've got connections to fancy people, powerful people, and they're all just liquid lies, right? So I can just imagine that any girl working at any of these clubs, anywhere across the country, probably has countless stories of some guy promised her big things, and of course all these guys are just full of it, right? So he invited a bunch of girls back with him to go on his personal private jet, and he said that he'd fly them to Vegas for the night. So none of the girls are believing him at all. And if I remember correctly, he said that a few girls, maybe like 4 or 5, decided to take a gamble and go with him. All the other girls figured he was full of dog excrement and stayed back. Now, it's probably not a safe thing for the girls to go along with a guy like that, with all the crazy people in the world. But Mark Cuban comes off as a pretty nice guy, and he seems like a fun guy to be around. And you could only imagine how fun he was and relaxed when he was, just made $1 billion. So he was probably a good time, to be around. He's probably having a lot of fun. He's probably he's obviously throwing a lot of money around in the club. So obviously they figure he wasn't broke. And if you ever saw the early pictures of Mark Cuban, he was pretty nerdy, and his friends are probably nerdy too. And so it's a group of guys. The girls probably thought they were all kind of dorky, and at least they had a bunch of money. So they probably figured that he was probably harmless. They figured he's probably full of crap, but at least he was harmless. That's what they figured. So he's saying that the girls who went with him figured he was probably, talking a big game, and at least they'd have fun just hanging out all night with him and his friends, and maybe they'd go bar hopping, maybe they'd spend a little bit of cash. It would be probably a fun, memorable night. But when they drove to the airport and boarded his private jet, he said the girls could hardly believe it. He talked about how they partied on his jet, and obviously you can only imagine, the party they had on the jet. And Mark Cuban has said many times over and over again how over the years, how the more money he made, the handsomer he got, which sounds really funny, but when you look at how society is and you realize that he's 100% correct, and that's just how things are, but it's funny when you hear people saying it, because that's something that rich people don't say. You don't hear a guy like, I can't even think of a rich person off the top of my head, but of course there's a zillion of them, but they don't say that stuff, but Mark Cuban comes out and he says, the more money I made, the handsomer I got, which is funny, but it just goes to show, people like you better when you have money, especially when you have lots of money and you can maybe do something for them, maybe give them some money, borrow them some cash they'll probably never pay back, or get them a car, get them a wardrobe of clothes, whatever it might be. And he talked about how those early days of getting rich were some of the most fun times. Plus, this was before he was married and had kids, and he didn't have a public reputation yet, and he didn't have to worry about what people thought of him. Not that I think that he cares what people think of him now, but I think it's a little bit different because he does have a reputation. He's on TV, he's on Shark Tank, and he owns a basketball team. So at some point, I think he probably watches himself a little bit more, watches what he says, as opposed to when he was 40 or 41 and just made a bunch of money and he had no filter at all. And this is where all these good stories were coming from. Unfortunately, if you weren't around back then, or you didn't catch those stories, you have no idea they exist, because poof, they're gone. And a lot of these, it's funny too, and I'm getting off topic, but real quick, and I'll dig up, I'm going to dig them up too. I got a lot of stories that over the years I would print out. I'd find an article online, about Mark Cuban, about someone else, but a lot about Mark Cuban, because there was a lot of interesting stories, and I would print them out to read them and reference them, because there would be a lot of things in them that he would talk about working in those early days of running his business. Now he just seems like that fun, laid back guy, but in the stories he would talk about how he'd walk up and down the aisles of all these salespeople he had, and he would yell at people to stay on the phone and give rewards to people who were making sales, and if someone wasn't on the phone enough, he'd yell at them, embarrass them, maybe fire them, whatever else. But he would say all this stuff, and you can't find these stories anymore, because I've looked, and luckily I have them. I have them printed out, and I just have to dig them up, and I'll make more videos on those. But anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. But anyways, the party on this plane, and him, his friends, and a handful of strangers, and he talked about what a fun plane ride it was. And again, you can only imagine what a blast they had. And I'm not even saying, there was shenanigans going on. I mean, was there? I don't know. I don't. There's a part of me that would say probably not, because again, these guys were, Mark Cuban was, if you saw his earlier, pictures of him in his earlier days, he was like a big nerd, but a fun nerd, and so I don't know that it would have been anything. And again, the girls that were with him on the plane were the cool girls, the cool girls. So there was that intimidation factor and everything. So I don't even know that I'm guessing there's probably not shenanigans going on that you would automatically think happen. They probably just had a good time, but I don't think anything. I'm guessing probably nothing more than that. But again, you gotta imagine it was just a fun time, just a blast. Ironically, he didn't talk about what went on when they got to Vegas, but I'm guessing he probably spent $1 million or so, and of course I'm sure they had a blast, because what's $1 million when you're worth $1 billion, and his wealth is only just multiplied since then. And one quick point before I wrap up this video, and this is what I find really, 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 really interesting. Okay, and if you're still tuned into the video, this is the point. I think, again, this is kind of off topic for what the video is about, but it's on topic if you're thinking about money, right? And think about a guy like Mark Cuban. He's made $1 billion. He made $1 billion at 40. Okay, he's 65 now, but at 40, he made $1 billion. And obviously, he spends a ton of cash. He bought a mansion. He's bought mansions around the world. He's got the mansion in Dallas. I know he bought a high rise in New York that was millions of dollars. I don't know if he still owns. I guess he does. I think he owned a house in the Caribbean, and that's just off the top of my head. I'm sure he owns more. He's got a jet. He bought a basketball team, and this is all in the last 25 years, right? And he spent millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, and at the same time, his net worth increased from $1 billion to like $5 billion now. Now, how incredible is that? So he fulfills every person's dream that they've ever had, and he's still richer after doing all that. Like, think about that. Like, over a 25-year span, you spend all this money, and instead of like your money going down like the rest of us do, like maybe you have $1,000, right? And you go buy, you pay a couple bills, you go maybe buy a pair of shoes or something, you buy a hat, and you have less money, right? And then you start all over again. A guy like Mark Cuban does all these things, buys big things, mansions and jets, and has a great time. And after all that, he's richer than he was. And not only just richer, he's 5 times richer. I mean, that is crazy. And of course, he's getting richer and richer as we speak. While the rest of us got to work and bust our tails, he just keeps getting richer, and it's incredible. It's incredible. But make sure you comment. This was a fun video, so make sure you comment and like the video and have fun. And I'll see you in the next video.